Welcome to Sister Sis. Thank you guys for joining us here today. Look, like, subscribe down below. We have a guest here that's joining us here today, Miss Dr. Tania. We'll go ahead and let her introduce herself today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tania Davis, and Tania's just fine. And a little bit about me, my background, I'm a Chief People Officer for NORC at University of Chicago. I'm an award-winning author, a mom of two, and living my best life.
Hey,
Thank you for joining us here today. We'll go ahead and pass it over to Miss Toya and let her get us started.
Okay.
I love it. Live your best life, girl. So, the first question, what values do you think are important for a company and how do they influence daily operations?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Definitely integrity, respect, innovation, accountability, I would say are non-negotiable, right? It shouldn't be about what's on the walls of the organization. It should be how the organizations live and breathe. And
Mhm.
when they don't, employees know, trust me. So I definitely it's modeling the behavior, setting the tone so that the organization knows what they're following. What is the purpose, right? Align people around the purpose, the mission, and within that, ensure that the leaders are exhibiting that behavior.
Okay, okay. So, what role does leadership play in shaping and maintaining the company's culture?
A lot. It's about prioritizing, communicating, engaging, and it's important, especially in this climate. And I've said this before on a different call. How the tone is set for inclusive environments is so important. Not just that, but leading with empathy. I don't think people really want everyone to agree with them. They would just want to feel that they're heard.
Hmm.
And so empathy is important, creating an environment where everyone belongs. I think belonging is the term that's used now, is
Uh-huh.
extremely important. And then where others feel they are empowered is very important.
Okay. So, how do you see leadership evolving in the next decade, especially with the trends like remote work and automation and AI and all of that stuff come into play?
Yeah. I would say it's more so about it be influence driven, being able to connect, engage, and cut across all digital platforms is very important. Connecting in, and it is hard. I have team members that are in other states, and I have some that are in local offices, and it's easier when they're just right there. You can run in their office, they can run in your office, and you can have a quick
Mhm.
conversation. It's a lot easier to connect, and they can learn your style, you can learn their style, and you build a rapport. But via Zoom, sometimes it's a little more, problematic. And so as leaders, we're finding ways to connect in where there's that authenticity, where people feel they can connect and trust you, right? And building that rapport so you can, of course, continue to get the work out. But it is problematic. And I see the differences of working with someone before COVID, even. And
Mhm.
then, you know, post COVID, it's like, oh, wow, you started 2 years ago. This is my first time meeting you, and it's a different rapport. And, people want to connect in the workplace. They want to feel they know you, you know them, and there is some air of connection and respect. That's really important. So leaders are, I would say the description of leaders today is drastically changed. It's moved away from, okay, here are the 5 task things, and this is what we're going to do this year, and let's go get them. And it's more so, let me get to know you, you get to know
Mhm.
me. Employees want to feel that you are connecting into what their dreams and aspirations are and giving them feedback. And so it's a little more complicated because with that comes a lot of, social aspects of it as well. And so it's understanding a very diverse, complicated workforce today.
I have a
Mhm.
follow-up question to that though. How do you keep the balance though when you are in leadership and then you still have to manage and guide and then still be able to counsel these individuals as well while you're still trying to build that rapport?
You know what? I can only say what works for me, right? I am very transparent and very authentic, but I also create space for people to be authentic as well. And so finding that common ground is extremely important. My message will be my message. Sometimes I have to deliver a message that might be a little more, to your question, more of a serious tone. But what I've learned so far is that, if employees feel that you really care and that you're consistent in what you do, they might not like your message, but they will respect your process. And
Mhm.
so consistency is important. You know, can't show up as one person today and show up as somebody else tomorrow. And your practices have to be the same across, right? And so that's where fairness, creating a space where people feel they belong, they're included, and the balance, you know, I don't feel I have a problem balancing it. I set the
Mhm.
tone, the mission, why are we here? What are we doing? I hold everyone accountable, and I'm consistent across that stage. So if there is a conversation, I try to bring one of encouragement first, right? Because I life happens. Life is happening for a lot of people.
Right, true.
And I think sometimes leaders get caught up and they don't know how to connect and they don't know how to have empathy.
Mhm.
So they disregard that life is happening. And I think that's a huge misstep because everybody gonna have something one day, right?
Yeah.
Right,
And
right.
so life is happening. And so I try to give space for that, but also explain what we need to accomplish and balance that out. And typically, I truly believe people show up to give their best and do their best, and sometimes things get in the way. So
Mhm.
coach people through it, still have an expectation, still hold people accountable. But I have found that when you allow that space for folks to allow life to happen, they tend to come back stronger, willing to work and wanting to work. And for those that don't, then maybe they're in the wrong place. But those numbers are small. I tend to see people really trying to navigate a lot and sometimes just needs coaching, sometimes mentoring. Everything is not a harsh conversation. Oh, well, let me tell you what you did today.
Right.
And it shouldn't be about that. I think as leaders, leadership is a privilege. I'm going to say that. I truly
I
believe
agree with
leadership.
that. Mhm.
I truly believe leadership is a privilege. And some people should not be leading, but it is what it is. But in having that privilege, you have the opportunity to coach, you have the opportunity to develop people, you have the opportunity to really pour in and develop the next generation of leaders, right? Or if they want to be, or whatever the workforce is.
Right.
So I think it's important to recognize the dynamics that are in front of you and try to get the best out of everyone in that space. Everybody has a superpower, right? I think good leadership, and I've worked with some phenomenal leaders. What I admire most about their leadership style is that they had the ability to get the best out of the folks in the room, right?
Mhm.
And finding that in each person and encouraging them to grow and to be their dynamic selves. I think that's when you really have a great workplace.
Right.
What's your thoughts on? Because I hear a lot of leaders, employers say that since COVID, it's hard for them to keep staff.
Mhm.
Like people not really wanting to work anymore, or they want more time off, or just that more of that work life balance situation kind of thing. Do you see that kind of being like a problem as far as like keeping staff?
My experience, what I've seen, in the workplace, what I would say is a consistent thing. Employees typically don't leave a company, they'll leave a leader. So
Oh,
if they're not able to connect or feel they're able to get what they need, then
mhm,
they disconnect, right? And so I go back to the leader accountability, right? It's not a cookie cutter. There are some that need flexibility, right? COVID created a lifestyle, right,
mhm,
for folks. It does, but it also showed us, however, it also showed us that we can work anywhere in the world, right, and be productive. So, I don't have to see you every day. I'll know by your output if you're doing the work.
right.
However, how do I still keep people engaged? Now, there are some that take advantage, and I get and understand that, and then there are some that don't. And so, as leaders, I think it is our responsibility to figure out what is that right balance to keep retention in place, right?
Mhm,
Because yes, people are checking out, right? But people are checking out for many things. Mental wellness was a huge problem during COVID, and
mhm,
organizations typically didn't touch on that topic, And COVID brought more of that into the workplace to keep it balanced for people, right? If you need to sit on Zoom for 8 and 10 hours, that is a lot, especially if we had only, maybe been on Zoom for 15, 20, 30 minutes, right? And so companies need to continue to evolve, not just through the technology, but how they connect with their employees. What is the right support mechanism? But in all of that, the most important aspect of it is establish why are we here? What are we trying to achieve as an organization, and keep people focused on that, and create the ecosystem for them to do their best work, right? So, I don't think it's the same for every single company. It really depends on the company. What is the company culture? What is the dynamics of the workforce? And what is the speed to get to execution? That has a lot to do with it as well.
Okay. So, how should a company handle conflict or disagreements that arise in the workplace?
So, yes, I like to call it constructive conflict. Constructive conflict, I like to call it that, because constructive conflict means we're working towards a solution. We're working towards something, right?
Mhm.
I think we're in such a polarized state that we immediately go to, you're right, I'm wrong. I'm right, you're wrong. I'm going to win this conversation. It has to be my way. And we've lost the art and the vocabulary of the word and. And minus and, it's really hard to get to reconciliation and understanding in conflict. And so, in that, I always like to say, well, I feel or whatever the conversation might be, and you are coming from this perspective, right? So what is
Mhm.
the common ground? We've lost the art of finding common ground. And so I see more constructive, more of the conflict without the constructive aspect than ever before. And I'm just surprised by that. I'm just really surprised by that. But when I listen to the conversations, it's like a battle. And in the vocabulary of conversation, there's nothing around how do you find peace in working. There's more of, I call it Game of Thrones. Okay, who are you today? Who am I working with today? And so I do think it's important, and I think that an aspect of that is listening. If there's one piece of it that I think is critical, is the ability to listen, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And sometimes people listen and they reboot. So they listen, but they're not listening to what you're saying. They're listening to respond. There's a big difference. And so if you're listening to respond, you're going to miss parts of the conversation that maybe you might need to hear, right?
Mhm.
And another part of that is self-awareness. When there's conflict, where I've seen the best constructive aspect of conflict is where there's self-awareness.
Mhm.
And where I've seen leaders not have self-awareness, it can actually destroy an organization, right?
Mhm.
You ever been in a room and it's like there's an elephant in the room and no one is saying anything, but they all know it. No one's saying it. I think we've all been there, but so in short, I think having the ability to listen, to understand, have
Mhm.
empathy, and self-awareness goes a long way in having constructive conversations around conflict. But I think this climate encourages conflict without the ability to have common ground. And I
Mhm.
think and I think that is a huge misstep, not just for organizations, I think just in life itself.
When
So I try to listen and find common ground. My approach is to find common ground and to understand. I don't have to agree, but I do want to understand why the person is taking the position they're taking. And
Mhm.
is it because I just try to understand the different factors, and try to reconcile that versus walking into a conversation. But I don't typically walk in for battle. That's not my style. But I look for the common ground.
you mentioned about self-awareness with the leaders, like what do you recommend with the leaders that you normally work with? Like if they are trying to work on bettering themselves, like what do you normally recommend for them?
Yeah, and this is the hard part, and that's asking for feedback. That's
Oh,
hard And so typically when I go into an organization, I kind of go through my own internal assessment of the organization. And I'm always curious when, people are asking for feedback and it's crickets in the room, right? I'm always
Mhm.
curious about that. So I think it's important to ask for feedback. I think it's also important to look at impact because sometimes leaders just don't read the room. They just talk.
Mhm.
I mean, I've seen some just talk, 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 and then everybody just like zones out, right? And I think that's a huge miss. I think it's important to connect in. I do ask for feedback and I ask for different opinions. I think it's important just to connect in. Like, what do you think about that? My way doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think that one of the things that, leaders do, some leaders do, not all, but I've seen some just, it has to be their way or they overtalk you or, they reposition. This would drives me crazy. Well, here's what you're trying to say. And no, I said what I said. But, I think that, those sort of leaders will miss the opportunity to learn. You can show up as the teacher and the student, and that's okay,
Mm-hmm.
right? You don't have to have all the answers. I don't feel I have to have all the answers, right? But I think remaining curious, is a large aspect of it as well. Because if you're curious, you're showing up wanting to learn and you're showing up wanting to participate, right? As a leader, there's yes, you drive and you lead, that's all part of it. But when you're working with a team or you're leading, an organization, whatever your place is in the company, there's a large aspect of it where listening goes a long way. Asking for feedback goes a long. That helps you to become a stronger leader because, you don't want to have blind spots, right? And so I think leadership development is a personal journey. It really is. It's a personal journey. There's no judgment around it. I don't, I try to help people where they are and support, wherever I can. But but the person has to decide what kind of leader they want to be,
Mm-hmm.
right? Do you want to be one of authority? Do you want to be the know-it-all? Do you want to be the one that inspires and encourages and drives change? Do you want to be the one that develops, what kind of leader do you want to be? Right? You're in the job, obviously, because of technical chops. So, there's some brilliance there. Okay. But how do you transfer that? How do you engage people to lean into that? And how do you rally people to, execute and be productive? That's a personal choice to be a particular leader. And I don't say good leader because good leadership means different things to different people.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. You said something there that kind of sparked my ear. You said, "How do you rally people and spark them to be productive?" What would you? How would you answer that?
First, establish why they're there.
Mm-hmm.
It's so important for people to know what are they working towards? What is the company mission, right?
Mhm.
Why are we here? What is the purpose? What are
Mm-hmm.
we here to accomplish? And then what is their role in that? And that's what you kind of keep people focused on, right? And then how you get them there, that's the artful part, how you get them there, right? But they should always be able to point back to this is what we're trying to accomplish. Then and this is why we show up. The mission of the company is to do XYZ. Okay, that's great. But what does that mean for the person doing this job, right?
Mhm.
And it's helpful for an employee to see where they fit in the picture because everybody has a role to play. Everybody does. From the person that sweeps the floor to the person that signs the check.
Sure.
Everybody has a role to play. And if they understand the mission of the organization, the purpose, and what does the company stand for, then sometimes when things go off track, you get people aligned back to that place, right?
Right. Right. Okay. Okay. Well, all righty. Well, thank you so much, Miss Tania, for joining us here today. We'll go ahead and stop here and wrap it up.
Okay.
And
Thank you for having me.
Mhm. So until next time, there's strength in sisterhood.
supporting sisterhood. Bye.
Bye.